Shalom, shalom, everyone, and welcome to the House of Selah Ministries as we continue in the deep reading through the book of Hebrews, the book I believe Paul has written, and I believe it's a necessary deep dive so people can understand, because this is probably outside of Revelation. This is a more complicated book that requires full understanding of Scripture from the very first to the last. This lesson is presented by yours truly, Brother Andrew Bradley, and once again, Dr. Brown House Ministry. So, in our previous part 11, last week's lesson, we spoke on proving Yahusha is the minister of a better covenant and how he ministers this covenant or mediates in this covenant. And I brought up Matthew 25, 34 through 36, and I'll read it just to give a good summary of what we talked about so we can continue in today's lesson. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was in hunger, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. Naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Adonai, when saw we thee and hungry, and fed thee, or thirsty, and gave thee drink? This is important because this is physically representing a spiritual understanding. But the church takes this in a very literal way because there is no spiritual understanding in the church. We discussed previously hungered, thirsty, and strangers. Hungered where we fed them, and thirsty where we gave them drink of the physical and spiritual understanding of Torah. And we weren't afraid to take in the stranger who desired to learn the ways of Yah and to love Yah. And we brought up how in Torah we are not to reject the stranger, even though at the time Yahusha was living on earth, the Pharisees taught that we had nothing to do with a stranger, which was not scripture. We talked about all that. So we're going to continue now with the word naked now on the next one. That's where we're at now. We're proving how Yahusha was ministering. This is a form of ministering this covenant, all right? Because he's the head of this covenant. He's ministering it by saying who's in and who's out, because one obeyed and one did. And we're going to clarify that as we continue. All right? Any questions?
I have one question, Brother Andrew. Are you going to cover, I'm asking so I don't lesson step. Are you going to cover the topic where it's written there, I was in prison and you came unto me?
Probably not this point. I'm looking forward to that because we know what bondage is.
Okay, so
that's a good one.
It's coming up, but it's not. You are going to be.
I'm gonna make sure, and I'm gonna make sure it's in there. You better believe it.
And what about the part where it says I was sick? Are you going to be touching on that?
I haven't reviewed that part of the lesson. I want to make sure it's in there. Knowing me, I did do it, but you know me. I gotta go think to myself, let me review to make sure it's fleshed out correctly. So I'll review to make sure. Well, definitely make sure sick and prison is in there. Because I purposely broke this verse down each particular statement in it.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll hold it.
You're welcome. Hold that until next week. Okay. I don't think we'll get to it.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, at least we're thinking alike. You said, ooh, going to the one in the prison is gonna be nice. All right. All right. Anybody else? All right, well, let's go ahead and continue. So Yahusha said, when I was naked, you clothed me, clothed in righteousness. And this is something that the prophet spoke on and Paul spoke on. Because, be honest with me, come on. I gave a person, before I was even in Torah, before I was in the truth, I ran into a guy walking down the street with his pants ripped from his butt to his ankle. And I was coincidentally moving, and I had a bunch of clothes, and I was bigger than the guy. But in this condition, I don't think he can. So I pulled him to the side and said, would you like some clothes? Now, it's a kind gesture for getting some jeans and shirts and things like that. It's a kind gesture. But do you really think that's what the Messiah was talking about? If that's all I had to do, and we said this last week, then all I got to do is just go to a homeless shelter or open up like a soup kitchen and I'm into the kingdom of heaven. Mm-hmm. How does that apply to a kingdom where there is no hunger, where there is no worry for clothing or shelter? How does that apply to that kingdom? Now, I'm not saying this type of kindness and those type of work are not favored in your favor. I'm not saying those things are not things we should not do. I'm not saying that. I'm talking strictly in the sense of salvation. That's what I'm talking about. So there's more to that. But when I thought of the clothing of righteousness, I thought of what Paul spoke of in Ephesians, the girdle of truth, which is righteousness, which is Torah. And Isaiah speaks of it in 11:5, and righteousness shall be the girdle of his Lord, and faithfulness, the girdle of his reign. Ephesians 6:14. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth. Torah, righteousness. Psalm 40 and 8. That righteousness never no. Yes. No. Psalm 40 and 8 is, I love to do thy will, O Heavenly Father. Thy Torah is in my heart. It's Psalms 119 and 142, I believe that. Your righteousness is everlasting righteousness. And Torah is the truth. Somebody double check me on that to make sure I gave the audience the right one. Could be 119 verse 142. Yes, you're right. Put that on that comment. Got it right. Thank you. Breastplate of righteousness. Isaiah 59 and 17. So he put on righteousness as a breastplate. And here Paul says in verse 14 as well, and having on the breastplate of righteousness. He's speaking to us, Paul is. Okay? The clothing is all about obedience. Being obedient is righteousness. All right? That's what righteousness is. The act of a person who is obedient. A person who has become obedient. All right? Any questions so far?
Yes, I would like to add, well, let me ask. Are you going to speak on the book of Revelation regarding this?
No.
Okay, then.
So please add.
Thank you. I would like to bring our attention to the book of Revelation. It's in chapter 19. Excuse me. Chapter 19, starting in verse 7. 2 verses, 7 and verse 8. It reads, let us rejoice and exult and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready. It did not say that Yahusha made her ready. It said she made herself ready. And it was given to her that she should be clothed in fine linen, bright and pure, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. So I wanted to give another witness to what you're saying about the clothing is righteousness, and that can be found in Revelation 19, 7 through 8.
Ooh, minister, that is a good one. That is a good one. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And put that in the chat so we can have it, someone, please. That's really good. That's excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, anybody else? All right, let's continue. And then he continues, of course, you seek God with the preparation of the gospel of peace. What Paul says, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or that's what he speaks of, right? So he's speaking of Isaiah 52:17. How beautiful on the mountain are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings. That's the gospel, good tidings. Yeah, it's the gospel of peace. You're not going to have good tidings when you're at enmity with Yah. You got to have peace with him to have it. That publishes peace, that bringeth good tidings of good, that publishes salvation, that saith unto Zion, thy Elohim reigneth, not to the world. This is specifically a topic, a statement, a reference unto the people of Yashar, the Hebrews. Ephesians 6:15, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Notice Isaiah did not say gospel. I want people to understand that. That gospel as a modern translation concept. It does not go word for word to what you see in Isaiah. So when you see gospel, it really means good tidings, good news to Zion. The gospel is more like a modern term, and it's really used to get the church to believe that the gospel is the first four books. If the gospels were the first four books, then why does Isaiah speak of it here hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before, quote unquote, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John was written?
Mm-hmm.
So he's really talking about a kingdom. And we've talked about that in other lessons as well. So you have to understand that gospel does not mean first four books, because I'll let Gianni find this verse for me, where it says, Paul says, the gospel was preached unto Abraham. If the gospel was preached unto Abraham, then how is it the first four books? This is how the church is misled. That's the reason why I had that statement in.
Mm-hmm. Oh, brother,
Right.
brother,
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
when you say the first four books, are you meaning Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Do you mean those four
Yes, the
books?
first four books of the New Testament.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Are you going?
Galatians 3 and 8.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I believe Gianni found it for us. Brother Gianni found it, Galatians 3 and 8.
He did.
You want me to read it?
You can read it, yes, and then Minister White, you can answer your question.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And the scripture foreseeing that Yahuwah would justify the heathen from faith, preach before the gospel unto people saying, and means to all men that people know. You know, I'm glad. That's the verse that the church loves to preach. He again pointed out that the gospel was preached to Abraham. So do not believe the gospel, which are the first four books. About how the church puts it. If they say that the gospel are the first four books, then they're saying also of the New Testament. They're saying that your salvation is only there. That's one of the things they teach. Your salvation is not found in the old, it's found in the new.
For anybody say that the gospel, the first four books of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John were the first four books of the whole entire Bible?
Yeah, I didn't say that, Minister Ronnie. That's not what I'm saying.
Because I know they don't live. I know they don't believe in because it's really that word gospel is supposed to be before.
Right.
The Bethorah was preached to Abraham. It was not the gospel. The word to be Bethorah. So they do not live by the
No, but you gotta understand. You say Bethorah in 99% of the churches, and they're not gonna know what that means.
The Torah. If you say law, they'll know that one. If you say law, they know that one.
That's a dirty word in the church. So, but to clarify, so now since you said that, let me make sure the audience. The church calls the first four books of the New Testament the gospel, plural.
Hmm.
If they say the Gospel of Matthew, the Gospel of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. So in their mind, in the church's mind, when you say gospel, they're thinking the first four books by default.
Oh, that's true. You never hear the Gospel of Galatians or the Gospel of
No.
or the Gospel of Revelation. You never hear that. You hear those four books. You are right. You are right.
And it takes away the true meaning because we know that it's good news of the coming of the King, good news of salvation because the kingdom is at hand.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, the church teaches that the gospel is really about the life of Jesus and repentance and accepting him as your savior. That's what the gospels are all about.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they teach. That's what I really meant. I wanted to make sure that's clarified.
Okay. My question,
Mr.
my question was going to be what you have in bold. It says, your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Are you going to elaborate on that?
No, ma'am. You may.
Okay, I wanted to highlight that because the way that's written, if you look at it from a Western mindset, it could be deceptive. So when we quote Ephesians, because you find that in Ephesians chapter 6, right? Your feet,
Yes.
you have shod on your feet, you have placed on your feet the preparation of the gospel of peace, because you want to have peace with Elohim. When you look in Isaiah, it tells you what that peace is. You see it right there? It says, how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bring good tidings. What's the good tidings? Publishing peace. This word publishing could also be preaching peace. So what is it that they're preaching that brings the peace? What is it that they're saying that's a good tiding? This is about, as what Minister Ronnie said, the Old Testament. This is about the commandments. This is about the laws, statutes, commandments that were first written in the Old Testament and are still applicable today. Obedience to those things, walking it out, that's why it's on the feet, because it's a lifestyle. That's why he says, preparing yourself. Your feet are shod to prepare you to live this life. The life that's outlined all the way from Genesis to Malachi. That will bring peace with Elohim. And those who reject that are heaping wrath upon themselves from Elohim. They're not at peace with him, even though they don't see anything happening right now. They are not at peace with him. To be at peace with Yahuwah, you must be walking this life. So that's what it means to shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. The only way you're going to have peace with him is to be in obedience. Thank you, Brother Andrew.
No, thank you, Minister. That's correct. You're literally preparing yourself for the coming peace that is coming, this kingdom. Because you're not going to enter this kingdom if you're not prepared to do so. That makes sense. All right. Anybody else?
Although, yes, I want to just top on top of Minister White already revelation. The work is what she's referring to with the walk. It's the camel with the revelation in the back. The revelation with you wherever you go. and it ends up in the works of the Torah. So the works, what you do, if they say you do not have to work, you do have to work because your faith produces work. You know that. You have to fulfill your work, your daily work for Yahuwah. You have to. And the daily work that you perform is done with your feet because we're constantly moving on our feet. So he's saying where you go, you take the word with you. That's what the disciples did. They went door to door or however they did it on their mission. And that's what we're supposed to do. We are the tabernacle of the Most High. So we walk and take that word with us. That's why it says your feet is covered with it. That you're constantly walking with that, walking out the Torah. And the second thing, which you have mentioned in your videos, Brother Andrew, is that what they call first four books of the Gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, constantly is referring to the Torah, to the Torah. So without the book Torah, there is no Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. So how can you cannot forfeit it and say that these are the only four books of it going to exist, or we don't obey those, or those don't play a part in what we do. You have to get together because a lot of what you're doing came from those books, from the Torah. Actually, the first four, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is a repeat of the Torah, if you read it properly, except for the things that happen on the Son. Everything else is already been said. They want us to think we're under a new covenant, or we're under a renewed covenant. Thank you.
We are, and we're going to talk about that. We might get to that very point, Minister Lonnie, because that's in this chapter of Hebrews, chapter 8, and it comes in the next couple of verses. So we'll probably get to that point just to prove your point. Yes, ma'am. What the church has a hard time realizing, and I was talking to them, critical of the church because I spent all my life there, and realized how poorly we have been taught. The church teaches very well the wrong thing. So it's not like they don't teach, they just teach the wrong thing. They have taught the lie that the Roman Catholics have created and delivered for many centuries. And now because we buck this system, we are said we're wrong because we are a minority among the many. But the great thing about us is that we do read full book, and we can demonstrate what's right and wrong. All you got to do is stick with me, and I'll show you that what we've been taught is right and wrong. What we've been taught is wrong, and what I have learned through the truth is what's right. Bless you out.
I'd add, brother.
Yes, sir.
I have a quick scripture to back up Minister White when she was talking about peace. It's Psalms 119, 155. Peace.
Tell me that's not wonderful. Why would you throw something away like this? I know the church twists and says, well, we have a new law. It's ridiculous. But the fact that they want to throw something that provides so much, it baffles me that we've been taught this for so long. Anybody else? That's excellent, brother. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's continue.
Brother Andrew, I have an
Yes, sir.
John 16 and 33. I've said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulations, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Let's let you know that anything he brings you to, he can bring you through. This world can't bring you down unless you let it. He is the peace. He's bringing peace to those who are obedient.
That's the key. You got to understand, one of the problems the church also has is they don't really know who Messiah really is. They think of him something brand new from Matthew on out, and he was following them in the wilderness when he was walking in the garden with them. So he's not new. He's the Torah. He's the Torah. How else can he mediate the covenant that's built on the law? And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Just all right.
I have one more comment. I have a comment. The church has the truth sitting in front of them. They have the truth, so they're teaching the truth the wrong way. But they have the truth sitting right there in front of them. There's nothing wrong with the Bible. There is some alterations to it, but for the most part, the truth is there. It's the way they're presenting it to the people. And the people are not going back to study on their own. And I'll call it the masking of the Messiah. They put a mask on the Messiah and made him look like Esau. They put a mask on him and they made him look Romanistic when he's not. They make him a Christianity. And that's not who he is. But they put a mask on him so that we would not be able to see who we are. Because looking at him, we're supposed to be an image of who he is. So they put a mask over his face so we would not know who he is. But the mask is coming off. And as the mask comes off, we start to wake up and know who we are. We are his beloved. We're his set apart, set aside kings and priests of nations. And we shall return to our land and rule again. That's who we are. And as the mask comes off, we start to see who we are and we start to see who they are. Thank you.
Brother Andrew,
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
can I give a scripture for what she just said? She said
Please.
they put a mask on him, she says. You can read about that mask in 2 Corinthians chapter 3. It's in verse 15. It says, this is a New Living Translation because I was in a hurry to find it. So just in case you're wondering, mine doesn't say that in KJV. It may read a little differently, but it still hits the same point. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 15, it says, yes, even today, when they read Moses' writings, their hearts are covered with that veil, and they do not understand. That's the mask.
I love that verse. I love that verse.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about that part, if you continue, Paul is telling you that the purpose of the Messiah, of our Messiah, Yahusha, was to remove the veil so they can understand what Moses wrote.
Mm.
So how is it we have a new law when one of the purposes of Messiah in the first place was to remove the veil to bring understanding of what Moses did?
Mm-hmm.
I love that part of Corinthians. All right, let's continue. So now we're talking about the shield of faith, Ephesians 6:16. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. By the way, the wicked are not just Hasatan. We're talking about people that live around too. Sometimes we try to think it's just, oh, wicked is wicked. Wicked is those who are disobedient and those who do not love the truth. Sinners and such. Helmet of salvation and the sword of the Ruach. This comes from Isaiah 59:17. All right, and in helmet of salvation for his head. Paul quotes this in Ephesians 6:17. And takes the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Ruach or spirit, which is the word of our Elohim. So when you think and you put all this together, excuse me, you could say it's something like this. Those who spoke, taught, and lived righteously, so that others can learn and be clothed properly in righteousness, according to the word, Yahusha, the Torah of Yahuwah. These are the ones who we have clothed, those who have wanted to learn, have learned, and now have put on all this armor of righteousness. And this is the possession of the priest, of the royal priesthood, of Yah's people, to do this. All right? We are supposed to teach the world for those who want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
We teach our own, and we teach those who wish to learn the truth. That's what Yahusha was saying. I've read that many times, and it never dawned on me the true spiritual implications that he was talking about, because I only knew the physical words. I didn't even know the law, because the church does not teach Torah. It does not teach Torah. All right. Any questions or any adds to this?
I think we're good.
All right.
Mhm.
Let's move on. All right. So proving Yahusha is the minister of this covenant, we can continue reading in Matthew 38 through 30. Minister White, you mind reading that for me, please?
Sure. Matthew 25, 38 through 40. When saw we thee a stranger, and took thee in, or naked, and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick, or in prison, and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. The least of these are those who seek the bread and water Torah. The least of these are those who approach God's children. You'll see that in Matthew 18, 3 through 4. The least are those who should hear the truth, who said the truth, and dressed in the truth. Not the proud and powerful, but the least among us. And many fail to teach this in our world, because Torah and righteousness are not typically taught in the churches that dominate God's people. What makes up the majority of God's people is the Christian church. All right, so any questions? We understand how this clothing, this righteousness, is what Yahusha is talking about? Right. Now, I'm going to put it all together in the next slide or two. So let's look at the next slide. So I don't want to forget something. In Matthew 34 through 37, the sheep who are on Yahusha's right are the righteous, right?
Mhm.
We cannot forget this, because the word righteous in the Greek is dikaio, and it means observing divine law, or in a wider sense, keeping the commands of Yah. So the sheep are righteous. Why? Because they sang or taught and ate themselves, if you will.
Mhm.
They took in the stranger and clothed all who desired to be clothed in righteousness themselves.
Mhm.
You understand? So the sheep are the ones who are obedient to Torah. You cannot twist this definition. This Greek word never meant new law, some other law, the Beatitudes, and all that nonsense I've heard. It literally means divine law. And if you go look up the definition in the Merriam-Webster Dictionary online, you Google and look up Merriam-Webster Dictionary, you'll see that the word righteous means obeying divine or man-made law. Does that make sense?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. All right. So I need a reader. Who wants to read next? Brother Gianni, you want to read this for me?
Yeah, we can go ahead. Yeah. Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye first, everlasting fire, prepare for the devil and his angels. I wasn't hungry, and you gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you took me not in. Naked, and ye clothed me not. Sick and in prison, and ye visited me not. Then shall they also answer him, saying, not. When saw we thee and hunger, or a thirsty, or a stranger, or naked,
or sick, or in prison, and did not minister unto thee? Then shall he answer them, saying, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye did do one of the least of these, you did it not to me. And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, righteous into eternal.
The better covenant is not new, but simply has an additional promise, eternal life. And you see that he's ministering this covenant by choosing who was obedient and who was not. Who gets into the kingdom and inherits this promise, this better promise, and who does not. It is the sheep who were righteous and the goats who were sinners. So you have to understand that the lack of doing these things results in everlasting punishment. So you know he's not simply talking about eating and drinking. He's talking about the spiritual aspect of the kingdom. You failed to teach my people what is right and wrong. You didn't give them clothing of righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't feed them my revelation. And you want to be a part of my kingdom when you let others die in their sin because you refuse to teach them? Can you imagine that? You're going to want me to let you in my kingdom while you ignore the needs of your fellow brothers. Those who needed to know. It's different if they neglected. But the ones who needed to know. If when Brother Gianni first came to me and I blew him off and rejected him, it's on me. For example. It's stuff like that that he's talking about. Not food. Not food. Put it this way. If it was food and water, Hitler fed his people. He made sure they were clothed.
Mm-hmm.
He got access to the king. I don't think so. I don't think so. All right. Now, Minister White, we will not get to the prison piece on this part. We're going to go verse 7 through 9. We're going to go through verse 7 through 9 now in Hebrew. But in next session, I'll make sure we cover it.
Sounds good. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, brother.
I'm not feeling so I'm gonna make sure we have it in there. I'll make sure we have it in there on the next one.
Okay.
All right. Any adds or any questions? We see how he's the minister, which is the head, the mediator, and so on. He's that for this covenant. So it cannot be simply a new thing. It's not a new thing. He makes the decision. That's why he's the minister and mediator. All right. Any questions or adds? Okay. Let's continue. All right, now Paul explains that the first was faulty. But what is the first? So now we're moving from verse 6 to verse 7 and 9. All right, verse 7 and 9. I need a reader. You the brother, you're available?
Already ahead of you. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought the second. Finding fault with them, saith, Behold, the days come, saith Yahuwah, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Yashar and with the house of Judah. Not according to the covenant I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Mitzrayim, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith Yahuwah.
All right, great. Thank you, brother. Now, before this verse, Paul says, but now has he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant. He didn't say new here. So I don't know where this new is coming from. We're going to talk about that.
which was established upon better promises. For if that first you cannot forget what he spoken of. Calling the covenant new here, when he did just call it better in verse 6. He literally said better covenant. Why would it all of a sudden he say new covenant? That doesn't make sense. Now, did Paul really say first covenant? And was he really referencing? Did Paul really say that the first is covenant? Does it really reference covenant here? Can you forget what Paul has said throughout this letter? This is one giant letter. So that means you have to remember what he spoke on previously. You can't let it go. So for us to prove what he's really talking about, let's do a quick review what we have already discussed through the book of Hebrews so far. All right? Anybody have anything before we move on to the next slide?
Okay.
All right. Okay. Let's see that. Let's see. So, did Paul really say that the first is covenant, is referencing covenant? We know from our previous lessons that the first 5 chapters does not speak of a covenant that replaces the original. It does not speak of that. When you get to Hebrews 6, it speaks of Yahusha, our high priest, after the order of Melchizedek. It's not speaking of something new. Throughout Hebrews 7, Paul speaks of Yahusha being made a priest after the similitude of Melchizedek. Nothing new. We know that Melchizedek, the king of righteousness, was existed during Abraham's time because Abraham tithed him. So we know that this is something that isn't new. In Hebrews 7:11 through 12, Paul states that the priesthood has been transferred. Remember, we talked about that. He's talking about the Levitical priesthood to the Melchizedek order. So our Bibles have the word changed, as if the law has been changed. But when you look up that word in its true form, in the Greek word, it doesn't mean change, it means transfer, which makes sense. And it's talking about the priesthood, not the laws associated with the priesthood. The law still stands. There's a high priest only that can go into the Holy of Holies. That was the same setup the Levitical priesthood had. And that there's priests and so on. All the laws are still there. But it was the priesthood that got transferred to the priesthood of the Melchizedek order. Paul continues in Hebrews 7 saying that this transfer brought in a better hope. Why? Eternal salvation. Eternal life as well, mainly, right? This transfer brought a better testament. And it says that in Hebrews 7, but we know that their word also means covenant. It really means covenant, actually. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So the translators use testament here. And I believe this is done to really mislead you to believe that the New Testament is what is being referenced as containing the New Covenant. Because you have to understand, there was never a reason to use the word testament. It literally means covenant. Why use testament? Because it matches the teaching, the misdirected teachings of the church, with the way they say that the New Testament is the new covenant, is only all that we need, and we only preach out of this when it comes to salvation. We'll teach out of the old particular lessons and read about great stories, but when it comes to salvation, we only need the New Testament. It's all the way the Protestant church and the Roman Catholic and the Protestant church translated the Bible. You got to understand who did that. That's a history for another time. But we're never taught Christian or translation. Because if a people who were the progenitors, slaves, in some of the greatest wars in the world, how do they have the authority and right to give you a Bible and say everything in it is absolutely right, and I'm going to teach you how to read it and study it? That's what the church has done. The Catholic Church has some of the greatest history of world and some of the greatest dark, evil history you can ever describe. The Protestant Church as well, progenitors of much, much evil. And then they come to us once during slave trade and present us a book and then teach us how to read. And we have always assumed it's been right. We have to question the history as well.
Mm.
So everybody follows so far.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. Did Paul really say that this covenant, this transfer brought in better hope, like we said, right? And the better testament of covenant, and the translators use the testament here, the word testament, to lead you to believe that the New Testament is what is being referred as containing the new covenant, because it supposedly explains that the original covenant is no more, and that a new covenant is now here. But if you look at the word for testament, it means covenant. And when you look at the word covenant, it's the same word for testament. So it's a choice of word play. It's not that they did not know. It's what they want you to believe.
Mm-hmm.
When in fact it's not true. It is not true. Testament should not even be in this chapter. And he did say prior, like we talked about already, that he said a better covenant. So why use the word testament in place? It's because the scriptures use the audience to believe that it is the new covenant.
Brother Andrew,
All right, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to ask the audience to please be sure that your cell phones are on mute because we're hearing some background noises. So please make sure that your phones are on mute unless you are attempting to speak. Okay, thank you.
All right. Anybody? Any answers to this? Any questions?
Mm.
All right. So up to these verses, or this verse particularly, because the only thing concerning Torah in the original covenant that has been replaced is the Levitical priesthood, the high priesthood. Okay? So why would Paul, without any previous discussion in his letter, suggest that the covenant is now passed away and he is a new one? That's how poor they want you to read. Because if you read with the intent of understanding this full letter, you don't have a choice but come to the conclusion that this could not be the case. He could not have meant new covenant or first covenant, when in fact he never spoke of the covenant disappearing. And what's so strange about this, in the previous chapters, Paul speaks of a better covenant, never a new one. Nor did he speak of a New Testament, as if there is now a new set of scriptures that we should live by. And I know Gianni loves this verse, 2 Timothy 3:15. And that's where Paul was telling Timothy, and that from his child thou hast known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation through faith, which is in Yahusha. What scriptures that was wise to salvation that Timothy was taught? It wasn't a New Testament book available. Nothing like that was created. The only thing Timothy would have had that was tied to his salvation was the Torah and the. Explain that one, sir. We're not taught to think that way. The covenant should not be in this verse. It's italicized too, so that notes that it shouldn't be. But I wanted to show that through just understanding what you've been reading, you should know that it doesn't belong. The previous verses speak of Yahusha becoming our high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And it's the Levitical high priest that will replace. And that I'm glad, by the way, because they failed, we failed, and he's going to say that, finding fault in them, which we will talk about. They needed to be replaced because they were failing on their job. And we'll talk about that in the coming verse. All right. Anybody have any questions? Anybody want to add anything?
I would like to ask a question.
Yes, ma'am.
In what is called the Old Covenant, did that include Yashar being given something like a promised land in the Old Covenant?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Because if it did, and according to the church, this new covenant is replacing the old covenant. The new covenant does not talk about promising the land to Yasharel, so that means that the old covenant is done away. Then the promise for land is also removed. So why are there a people in Jerusalem today claiming that they are Jewish, claiming that land when the old covenant is done away with and the new covenant does not promise land? So it looks like to me that they're working both covenants, the old one and the new one, from their perspective. Just like if the Christianity will say the old laws are done away with, but tithing and offering is still a very integral part of their ministry every Sunday. Tithing and offering is something that was established in the Old Testament. That's an old law. So if the old laws are done away with, then you should dispose of tithing and offering as well. But you're trying to have pick the things that you like from the Old Testament, and then choose things that you like from the New Testament, or should I say from the original covenant versus the renewed covenant. Not understanding that it is one. They're not separate, they are one. So I just wanted to highlight that if the law or if the covenant, the first one, the original one, is nullified, then all the promises that was attached to it are also nullified. Don't look for any of those things anymore. That's all I want to say, Brother Andrew.
That's a very good point, Master. So there is no kingdom. Where you going to go, Christian? There's no land. So you're going to have a magical floating place somewhere. Oh, that's right. Y'all going to heaven. Sorry, but that's how they do. Yes, sir.
Like to caveat, got a scripture to back up what Minister White was saying about law. We know Torah is the law, and who is the living word of the Most High, which is Torah, which is the Messiah. Deuteronomy 31:8, in Yahuwah, he that goes before you, he will be with you. He will not fail you, neither forsake you. Fear not, neither be dismayed. If he means he's not fail you, and he goes before you, how is the law done away with when he's going before you to mediate? How is the law done away with? He's going before you. How's the law being done away with? That means he never went there. If the law's done away with, that means he never went, he never came here, he never did anything for us. It's null and void. You see where I'm going? So how is it done away with? The law is eternal. There is no doing away with it. He does not forsake us and not leave us. And it's permanent. Like you said, you can't get away with the Old Testament. You can't get away from it. You can't get away with the laws like tithing. It's permanent. His laws are permanent. Do you think when we get to Shaman, we're going to stop tithing? No. He said, my word is eternal. That means the Mashiach's alive in.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many holes, brother. There's so many holes.
Their word has a broken soil. It has no water.
Mm-hmm. It's like a bucket full of buckshot. They got all them holes in it, boy. Because think about it, like Minister White says, the law's done away with, but you'll pick that tithing law up, won't you? Mm-hmm. That offering law you'll pick up.
Mm-hmm.
But if the law's done away with, why aren't you out there murdering and stealing?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many holes in that region. All right, so I hope we understand so far that this first doesn't make sense. So when we move to the next slide, you see that it should say for that first priesthood. All right, for that first priesthood had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second, for finding fault with them. How could he be talking about a covenant when he's talking about a people? Them. He didn't say finding fault with it.
Mm-hmm.
He said with them. All right? So reading this now, you can see why it says in verse 8, finding fault with them. And to further support that this is not a new covenant, now we should examine Paul is actually quoting. Now, so we got 3 more minutes.
True.
We might end it here. Any questions? Any answers? Okay. We're going to pick up on Jeremiah to support what we're talking about when it comes to news in next week. We're at the end of our time tonight. So what we focus on today is speaking on how Yahusha is the mediator of this covenant, how he takes the righteous on his right and selects them, because he's the mediator and the minister of this covenant. He's going to pick and choose. And if they're righteous, that means they're obedient, according to Dikaios, the word Dikaios, they're obedient to Torah, to the commands of God. That means then Yahusha mediates by the Torah. All right? And that means those who are on the left are the goats who are sinners. Now, those goats get eternal punishment, as we read previous slide. We also spoke of last week how these 2 animals are clean animals. They are animals with a split hoof and they chew the cud. So these animals are a physical representation of Yashar. So this conversation is to Hebrews. And the conversation Yahusha was having in Matthew 25 were to Hebrews. And they were calling them clean animals because they did eat clean. The Pharisees ate according to the dietary law. They were the biggest sinners because they put the commandments of man above the commandments of Yah. They were hard-headed and wouldn't listen, just like a goat. You couldn't tell them nothing. And where did they end up? On the left hand. Why? Because they rejected the strength. They refused to teach a person. They were past man who wounded. What is the parable where he passed a man that needed to be clothed or fed on the road, and he said pray, and he prayed for him or something and walked away? That's the type of people the Pharisees and Sadducees were. They were the goats. And we also spoke that among the sheep will be the nations that have cleaved other nations, of people of other nations who have cleaved to the covenant, practice the Sabbath, know who the people of Yahusha truly are, and love Yah.
So we didn't exclude everybody, but in reference to the scriptures we taught on last week and this week, it is referencing Yahusha, the Hebrew. And then we also spoke on tonight how the covenant is not being removed. It's the priesthood that got transferred over, got taken out of our hands, and we kept screwing it up. And we see that here. And then next week we'll find the word new according to Jeremiah 31. All right? All right. Anybody want to add anything that I might have missed? Sum it up for tonight? All right. Well, thank you all once again for joining the House of Keto Ministries on our lesson in the deep dive of the book of Hebrews. Join us again as we continue in chapter 8, where we're going to discuss really what this new quote covenant really is. Thank you all, and shalom, everyone.
I'd like to say one thing to our audience, and that is if you've come to the end of this lesson, you like it, and you found it to be inspirational and helpful to you, take a moment and hit the like button for us so they can push it through the search engines, that others can also find this message and benefit in the same way or similar ways that you have. Thank you again for fellowshipping with us. We hope to see you again next week. Shalom.